Okay, today is December 27th, I think. I've decided, having gotten this Bandicam up and working again, and also because maybe I've been avoiding doing this sort of thing, to talk more extemporaneously about subjects that maybe are not even in the memoir, that are more topical in nature. And first of all, let me say that I am very comfortable speaking to audiences with a lectern and with notes. Not so comfortable at this point talking with you folks out there in Wonderland uh, without notes. So I will be looking down uh, at notes at various times, even though my mentors say that I should be looking straight into the camera. Well, I can't do that, and I don't profess to be a professional, so here goes. We've lost several wonderful artists in the last few months this year, including Prince, Leonard Cohen, um, and just the other day, um, Carrie Fisher. Prior to that, Patty Duke. They all have something in common, or had something in common. I can't speak much for Prince, uh, except that I suspect he was self-medicating uh, because of maybe stage fright and accidentally overdosed. Patty Duke died of natural causes, of course. Leonard Cohen as well. And yesterday, Carrie Fisher passed away, having had a cardiac arrest on a jetliner. No doubt either ventricular tachycardia, a primary dysrhythmia, or a bona fide myocardial infarction. What these folks all have in common is the artistic temperament. And what I want to talk a bit about is Leonard Cohen. I wasn't very much aware of Leonard Cohen until reviewing him actually after he died. I think I was so focused during medical school and residency and my practice that, other than knowing some Bob Dylan songs and some Judy Collins, this fellow from Canada was not well known to me. I was surprised to find that almost everybody I knew knew of his song Hallelujah, both sung by himself and maybe even better known by Jim Buckley. He, of course, became established partly through the help of Judy Collins uh, after he wrote Suzanne, for which many other artists are well known. I'll mention at the beginning here, of course, Come On Marianne, and one of the most popular songs used as a love theme in weddings, etc. I get out my notes here because I'm blocking on the name of it. Dancing to the End of Love. Dancing to the End of Love is a very esoteric piece. Certainly when one listens to it, it sounds like a love song. But what I was told by two different sources is that in actuality, it's a song about two lovers who are entering the gates of a concentration camp in Germany during World War II. They are being serenaded by the orchestras that were created by the Nazis to welcome Jews into these camps. Orchestras themselves made up of Jewish inmates. And towards the end, the lovers part to go their separate directions to different showers. This love song without lyrics maybe most remembered by the scene in The Scent of a Woman where Al Pacino dances the tango. I want to talk a bit about the life and death of Leonard Cohen, and this is where you'll see me looking down a lot. You might also notice that my left, my left shoulder is quite a bit lower than my right, and that is because I have severe scoliosis of the thorax and lumbar spine, a source of much angst over the last 20 years. But other than one small operation, I think in 2008, I pretty much just lived with it. It is clear from reading a biography of Leonard Cohen by Sylvie Simmons, which was released in 2012, that he was bipolar. He, by his own admission, was suffered throughout his career by what he called his nemesis, depression. As far as mania, he was known for being driven at times to work as many as 23 hours a day on his music. He was born of Russian Orthodox parents in the English-speaking section of Montreal. He got his artistic tendency from his mother, Masha, who sang around the house as she did housework. His father, Nathan, died when Leonard was only 9, so his adult figure was his mother, Masha. She, however, along with her grandmother, would be the line from which he would develop his bipolar disorder. She was described as, quote, dramatic, and could be very, very dramatically unhappy about something and then break into laughter and send it all up. There was no telling how she was going to react. Masha was very volatile, end quote. Shortly after Leonard had gone to Columbia University in New York City, Masha was admitted to a psychiatric hospital at the Allen Memorial Institute for a major depression episode. Leonard was born into a very privileged family, living in a lavish home in an area called Belmont in Montreal. The money came from a clothing business by his grandfather. Ever the doting son, he left New York to be with his mother. And, quote, it's no surprise that Leonard would feel frustrated, helpless, and angry, a multi-purpose frustration, helplessness, and anger that seemed to take in his own condition as well as Masha. He knew by now that he had inherited her depressive tendency, and he was at his happiest himself. Irving Layton, end quote. Again, all of this is coming from Sylvia Simmons' book. Irving Layton, who was part of the poetry scene in Montreal, states that Leonard was born with a gold spoon, as mentioned above. He tried to become a member of the poetry scene in Montreal, but was, quote, was able only to find sadness, end quote. Layton says that, quote, that takes genius. He was able to see that not all rich people, not all comfortable people, not all plutocrats were happy. Genius is the ability, it's a very rare ability, to see things as they actually are. You are not fooled, end quote. To back up, Cohen entered McGill University to study poetry, and he felt that his calling in life was to write poetry and possibly novels. He left there without completing his degree and went to Columbia University, as mentioned, to further hone his poetic wish, his poetic dream. However, he made no money at his poetry, no money at a novel that he would subsequently release. And much like Vincent van Gogh, led a very bohemian life, living eventually in the famous Chelsea Hotel in Greenwich Village. At Columbia, his poems, though, did presage the themes of those to come, as well as novels, and eventually 33 of his songs, marked by, quote, religion, myth, sex, inhumanity, humor, love, murder, sacrifice, Nazis, Jesus on the cross, Joan of Arc, the Holocaust, naked women, and wounded men. These events were all occurring around the spring of '61. More evidence of his impulsivity is that he wanted to fly to Havana before it became closed to the U.S., and he happened to be there when Castro overthrew Batista, and he was even there when Bay of Pigs occurred. He liked role-playing, so he dressed up with baggy army fatigues as a Cuban revolutionary, and even grew a beard so that he would look like Che Guevara. This became a problem when he tried to get out of the country on one of the last flights. He was pulled aside as a possible revolutionary by the remaining powers to be, the Batista regime, to be interrogated. Fortunately, there was some kind of fracas on the tarmac, and he was able to slip onto the plane back to the States. It's probably well known that he found haven and refuge and reclusiveness on a Greek island named Hydra with a friend, Mort Rosengarner. According to Mort, quote, they would go to sleep about 3 a.m, but we'd get up very early, 6 a.m., and work till noon. I started drawing. In fact, the first time I really started drawing was there. I'd studied sculpture, but I'd never drawn or painted. And he also got me a bag of plaster, so I made some sculptures. At noon, we would go down to the beach and swim, then come back, have lunch at the port, and then we would go up to the house, have a siesta for a couple of hours, and then start happy hour. It was very good, a lot of and very productive. Leonard worked his ass off, but I couldn't. I'm sure neither of us could maintain that schedule. Leonard had the assistance, or at least the companionship, of a variety of drugs. And aside, this included quaaludes, amphetamines, hashish, and LSD. It was here in 1961 that Leonard wrote the poem Flowers for Hitler. I might note that this sojourn to Hydra, this particular one, was funded by a $1,000 grant from the Canadian Council for Poetry for what became his first volume of poems called The Spice Box of Earth. In 1967, he realized that he was going to have to change to another venue, and that's when he decided, while finishing his first novel, Beautiful Lovers, which again was not a success, that he would change to songwriting, both lyrics and singing melody. At that point, he moved to Greenwich Village and met Mary Martin. This was very essential, influential in his entire career, as Mary Martin also was Canadian and executive assistant to a fellow named Albert Grossman, who was Bob Dylan's manager. This Mary Martin met him, heard his song Suzanne, and called her friend Judy Collins, who was called the Queen of Greenwich Village at age 27. The rest, as far as Suzanne and Judy Collins, is history. The 60s ended by Leonard experimenting with Zen Buddhism with a fellow named Rashi on Baldy Mountain in Southern California. At times he would live there for 6 months to a year at a time as a recluse and as a way of treating his depression, basically to get away from everybody. He treated it as well with exercise and meditation. He squared Zen Buddhism with Judaism by the fact that neither religion prayed to any otherworldly figure. When his first album was released, Songs of Leonard Cohen, the reviews became amazing, and people started comparing him with Bob Dylan. By 1970, he was doing concert tours in Europe, but was still dashing in between sets to have some LSD and Quaalude. At one point, clearly a manic break, he was traveling in Europe doing a series of concerts, and he went to 8 European cities and did 9 shows in a 2-week period. He decided he would play up figures from the past. So in Hamburg, he dressed up as Patton, clicked his heel twice, and gave the Nazi salute. The crowd turned on a dime, turned against him and throwing things. One German ran towards him with a gun and got very close before a security guard tackled him. In Amsterdam, he invited the entire crowd to come back to his hotel, resulting in police action. In Paris, the police were called when he invited the audience to join him on stage. After that, he returned to Hydra during a coup d'etat in Greece. There, he rode up on a stage on a horse while hecklers called him a fascist. His next stop was on the Isle of Wight, where he called himself, quote, the army, end quote, because of his feeling that hundreds of thousands of young people were going to be there to topple the English island. At that point, on August 28th of, 1970, unbeknownst to him when he arrived, he was committed to Henderson Hospital in South London. He had had a psychotic break during what's called manic dysphoria. This is the only type of mania that does not feel good, and that can lead to psychosis. The hospital was unique as an asylum back in the 70s, as it did not use drugs, ECT, or any other invasive techniques. Talk therapy alone was the method. When Leonard was found to be an accomplished singer, his therapy was playing songs for the other patients. Subsequent to discharge, he played concerts at many mental institutions throughout Europe, and back in the U.S., he played at Napa State Hospital in the California wine country. And I can tell you from personal experience, not my own, but when I was a resident at UCSF, that this is a facility for the seriously mentally ill who have a one-way ticket. I'm going to jump ahead. Another role-playing manic episode, I think in the fashion of Ernest Hemingway, wanting to be in World War I for the fun of it and adventure, and Hemingway wanted to be in the Spanish Civil War, was Leonard's wanting to be in Israel during the Yom Kippur War of 73, actually 73/74. He wanted to join up in the army, but despite quote fantasies of glorious escapades, end quote, he was relegated to singing songs for the Israeli troops. Cohen's most famous song, of course, Hallelujah, is about sex, multiple romantic positions of sex, as well as conflict and surrender. The song took 5 years to write. It is arguably the most sung song of our time. Interestingly, during the time that Poland was under communist rule in the 80s, he played Warsaw on a promotional tour of an album. Leonard's name was already known in Poland due to a popular radio personality and Radio Free Europe. Lech Walesa wanted to appear on the stage with Cohen, but Cohen declined, not wanting to politicize the event or get the Polish promoter in trouble. His next album, I'm Your Man, was named Album of the Year by the New York Times. He sold out venues such as Carnegie Hall and Albert Hall in England, etc., etc. Speaking about depression, Ms. Collins states that Leonard tried Prozac, Zipramine, MAO inhibitors, Zoloft, Wellbutrin. He states they all made him feel worse. His biggest problem was that they killed his sex drive, he told friends. Friends suggested psychotherapy, but he responded, quote, I have no conviction that this model was workable, end quote. In 1999, he kind of lost it for Roshi and Baldy Mountain and went to India and came under the tutelage of, in Mumbai, Ramesh Balsekar, then 81, and a former president of the Bank of India. At that point, he became a Buddhist monk. He was very much influenced by a book that this fellow had written by the name of Consciousness. As I said, Ms. Collins' book was written in 2012. He gave concerts right up till age 81. I've listened to all of these now, and I'm blown away that I never was aware of him before. His longtime lover, Marianne, despite parting ways amicably and on Hydra many years earlier, remained in contact. She notified him that she was very sick, but not specify that she was dying of cancer. When Leonard visited her, and she died just shortly thereafter, he spoke into her ear before she died that he would soon follow her. In fact, he died 3 weeks later, and 3 weeks after he released his last song, You Want It Darker. There's no mention made of actual cause of death, except for a mention made of collapse of some vertebra, and that he died peacefully. That's what I want to say about Leonard Cohen, and to rest in peace, as well as Carrie Fisher, Prince, Patty Duke, and another young English artist, name I can't recall right off the bat, who passed away at home had somewhat of a mysterious past involving bisexuality and involvement in AIDS. Uh, his death was described as from heart failure, which is not something that just happens to you suddenly. Anyways, the cause of his death, the real cause remains a work in progress. Thanks for listening and putting up with my haws and ahs and uhs, but you get what you pay for. Have a good day.